or my son, he was giving our producers superhero names. That was their superhero. I'm Hulk, Pooh Bear's Captain America, and Zach is Superman. Who would Wilson Alexander be if you were a Marvel or DC hero?
Well, first of all, that was adorable. And second, so I don't really know. My fiance thinks that I kind of look like Chris Evans in certain situations.
Hey, you kind of do. Hair, it's the hair, right? I mean, yeah, you kind of do.
She thinks so, but I don't think I can take Captain America that's already taken. So I don't know who mine would be. That's the one that I would say, though, because she thinks I kind of look like Chris Evans sometimes.
Okay, we can have two. You got multi. What do you call that?
Yeah, we'll go into the multiverse.
Okay, well, there you go. So you could be the Captain America in another multiverse. How about that? All right, Wilson Alexander from the Advocates, our guest. Wilson, I'm going to give you the floor. I mean, what did you? So let me emphasize: you guys were out there at practice today. They kind of looked like there were a little bit more different drills than maybe that we'd seen in the past that were going on. But Brian Kelly, fourth spring practice, I believe it was. What did you notice today from practice?
Yeah, maybe a couple different drills than we'd seen in the 20-minute period that the media has gotten, 3 times now this spring. There was a passing drill where that shed some light a little bit on who's been repping at center, because not only was Marlon Martinez snapping back to the quarterback, so was Bo Bordelon, which we knew he was, playing center for the first time. And then Garrett Dellinger was over there as well, which, of course, everybody remembers that he was, starting at center in the season opener against Florida State before he got moved over to guard. And that's probably just in the sense of Brad Davis cross-training guys and continuing to do that and, having him, make some snaps here in the spring just to have that as like an insurance option. It's probably, I don't think it's where, Garrett ends back up, but, we got to see that. And we got to continue to see what really stood out to me anyway today was just the continued cornerback rotation and what things look like there, because Zay Alexander was, kind of running with the ones in this little full defensive drill that they do right at the beginning of practice for the second straight practice. And Jayden Toviano was the second team nickel. Now, Jayden had been the first team corner on Tuesday. So it just sort of shows that he's potentially got some versatility that could move him around the defensive backfield. He certainly showed that capability in high school, but it looks like it might be able to translate to this level as well. And the other cornerback was J.K. Johnson today, but it's been Denver Harris. It's been as well. And so they just kind of continue to move around a lot in that group as they, that's what Camp Battle is going to go for a while. But particularly Toviano at nickel, and seeing that he slides in the mix there was interesting.
And he's kind of a big nickel too, right? I mean, he's all of 200 pounds, and that's not always – I mean, today's game, Wilson, I mean, that's still a pretty big corner. Let me ask you, J.K. Johnson, we have not really talked a lot about him, the speedster DB out of Ohio State. Was it the first time that you had really saw him get some action today, like with the ones or anything like that? And what did you – if it was, what did you think of him?
I don't think it was. I'm trying to remember back to the very first practice. I know that I remember seeing –
It felt like he ran with the ones. It was him and Toviano, if I'm not mistaken, right?
I know Denver Harris was getting some work then too. But also remember, we're out there for 20 minutes and we're not seeing 11 on 11. And
right.
They've only been in pads for 2 days. But what I think is important to really, I guess, note then with all that, the sort of disclaimers is that JK, he looks chiseled. He's really seems kind of ripped, and which you would probably expect because he's been in a college program now for a little while. But yeah, he's going to be in the mix. He started games at Ohio State when they had an injury to their starter last year. And he's, like you said, speed. He doesn't have the same sort of length that like Zay Alexander has and that Toviano has. But you don't necessarily have to have that. So we'll see kind of, moving forward how he fits into all that. I would expect him to compete for time because he's shown that he can at another major program.
That's interesting because Wilson, what do you make that they're just rotating anybody and everybody out of DB and not letting anybody know anything? I mean, look, I'm not going to be the one to sit here and say, let's break down every single thing that's going on in spring. Sometimes I just kind of hate that. But at the same time, you go out there every day, there's something different. I mean, what are you trying to tell me then? Because if that's going on, you're telling me that you're having in that team meeting room a lot of like, hey guys, this is the board, boom, boom, boom. And I don't know what's going on there, but do you take that it's been that much of a rotation at DB?
I do, because we have LSU has a completely remade cornerback room. The only returner being LaTerrence Welch, and I would note that he was the second team corner in the sort of full defensive drills today. They've got to get a good look at all of these guys, and they got to rotate them through to see who can really play. Because even though you've watched film, either at high school or from another college or something like that, you don't know exactly what you're getting until you get to see them with your own eyes in person, during practice in high leverage situations. And so I do think that they are truly just rotating them quite a bit. And that really what we're talking about is an emphasis on how much these guys are all going to be competing with one another and how this thing is going to stretch for a while, because we don't even have the full picture with Deuce Chestnut out until summer workouts. So yeah, I do think this isn't like a smokescreen or anything. They're trying to get a good look at these guys and figure out who the best ones they have are.
All right. I've been peppered with this question. So we got 2 in the text, believe it or not, and we got 1 here from Jeff. So I'll just give Jeff the credit here. He says, is Josh Williams not participating in spring practice? I mean, they're texting us and they're putting it in the comments. So I know we're talking defense, but I guess switch over very quickly. What's up with Josh Williams?
Yeah, he had that knee injury
Right.
At the end of last season, and it's still something that he's getting over. He is not participating in spring ball right now. He was at practice on Tuesday, but simply sort of at practice. Like he wasn't, in pads like some of the other running backs. There aren't a lot of them, but the other ones who were there. And so Brian Kelly said on March 9th, the first day of spring practice, that of him and sort of Armani Goodwin, these injured running backs, that Josh was the closest to getting back in the spring and getting some work in. So that's his status right now. He's not a full participant, but there's a chance that he gets back in there at some point this spring to get some more work.
I hate flipping back and forth, but when people peppering you with that question, you're right, because he had even said that he was the next running back that would be back when the question was asked about John Emery. Interesting, back on the defense, Wilson. So Monday, me and one of our guests, we kind of went back and forth about the interior of the defensive line. Wilson, I made a big deal about it this week. Maybe I'm just a Looney Tune. LSU was 80th in sacks. Now, I think that they were held with duct tape along the interior defensive line as we had been on the show doing our film breakdown, stuff like that, okay? Brian Kelly made that an emphasis when he was asked a question this week and said we got to get better there, obviously, with Mason Smith. Do you think that when all is said and done, those are one of the things that because he's mentioned that every single time and kind of going a little out of his way about the interior and Mason Smith? I guess, what do you think about his comments when he's talking about that interior defensive line?
It's clear that LSU was getting worn down on the interior toward the end of the season because the depth was just not there. I mean, I think we've talked about it a few times now, just how much Jacobian Guillory and Mekhi Wingo were playing. I mean, Mekhi led the country in snaps for an interior defensive tackle. And so, yeah, it was duct tape, and they were holding it together and kind of doing what they could, but they didn't have a dominant or really just significant inside pass rush. It was all coming off the edges from B.J. Ojulari and Harold Perkins. Savion Jones was third on the team in sacks, and he wasn't even in, every down kind of player as a backup to Ali Gay. So what Mason Smith does is bring that inside threat. And this is something that I think going to be really interesting to watch as the season, unfolds and we see Mason, really get healthy and working, because he's still, a limited non-contact participant right now. But because he's going to be able to bring that inside pass rush, teams aren't going to be able to fan to one side. They're going to have to account for him up the middle, maybe even use a running back to chip with him. And then they have to account for him and Harold Perkins and whatever other exotic blitzes Matt House might scheme up. And so Savion Jones has been a great, I don't know about great, but certainly show that he could be a productive pass rusher. And if he's a starter defensive end, then maybe that's another guy right off the edge. And because you've got someone in the middle, there's just so much more that defenses are going to have to account for. That when Mason Smith is healthy, it opens up a lot of what LSU might want to do on the defensive front, because it can bring pressure from multiple different areas instead of just on the edges.
And I know that we talk about it a lot, and you're right. It's just when he brings it up and he talks about it. I mean, Wilson, go back and watch the press conferences. The longest answers that he's giving on a specific outside of like John Emery, stuff like that. I'm not talking about like big breaking news stuff. When we're just talking like actual ball, what you mentioned is exactly what he's talking about. It's his longest answer. So we get it. When we do it, just so we have it, for the show, we try to get everybody's tweets and this, transcription, and it's literally the longest thing that everybody types, right? And so I'm like, okay, well, maybe we'll have to continue to talk about that. Wilson, what we haven't talked about a lot, now we've mentioned it here and there. I do want to talk a little quarterback with you tonight. So we had gotten, some of the stuff about him going out there and working out with Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud, meaning Jayden Daniels. I guess there's not a lot you can take from it so far, but to me, he does look like he's put on a little bit of weight, though. I guess, what have you made of Jayden Daniels so far?
We haven't been able to really see him do anything significant on a practice field at this point because, like, they go through like stuff where they're going through bags and sort of not even really throwing against the defense or anything like that. He is a little bit bigger. Brian Kelly told me before season camp started that he was over 205. He was listed last season at 200, so that's a little bit of weight. And you can see it when he's out there and in his upper body.
I'll buy you a steak dinner if that kid was 100. It was 200 pounds last year. You and I both know that he was
listed.
Not 200. Yes. Right. That kid was 185. Now he's He's really 205 now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry for interrupting you, but continue.
No, it's okay. I mean, because you make a good point that you can see visibly it's probably more than 5 pounds that he's put on over this season. And that's really all we've been able to see to this point. That he's changed his face mask.
Right.
And a visor. Significant? Yes, that too. So some style changes. But yeah, like you said, he's been putting in the work with those guys out on the West Coast for a while now. 3D QB where he was working with Bryce and CJ. He's had a personal coach through them for a bit, and they've been working on his footwork. I can't remember exactly when that started. But I know that like last summer he was out there working with them, and then he went back over there during spring break. And so we'll see, how that kind of stuff pays off because they want him to get better at downfield passing and continue to work on his read progressions. Those are kind of the two main focuses on top of that bulk that we've already mentioned with his body to make sure that he can sustain as a running quarterback.
Wilson, what's interesting because we go through, and the producers I think hate this, but so it's been probably 3 or 4 years. It's what we've done every year. We go on a deep analytical dive, and I'm not an analytical dude, but I think it makes sense to kind of reflect on, all right, from a statistical standpoint, where did you really do good and really do bad? The interesting things to me that when we did this entire week, 34.5 passing attempts per game at 270 yards. Let's just round up 270 yards through the air this season while running the ball for 285 yards per game. I guess, Wilson, when we take the season back and pull back the curtain and we're not in what's going on during the season and we take a look back, are you surprised when you hear like just how good LSU was offensively last season?
I would be because it was a little bit uneven, throughout the year.
No doubt. And it just felt like, well, they're good, they're bad, they're good, they're bad. But then when you look at it like 270 yards and 180 yards rushing, I'm like, damn, it's not bad numbers. That's how you do get to 10 wins.
Yeah, exactly. And the way that Jayden played in the offense as a whole, sort of through him as the quarterback played in some of the biggest games. I mean, when, Ole Miss and Alabama and Florida in particular, that 3-game stretch where he was so productive and the offense was so particularly efficient. And the key for LSU now is to apply that over an entire year so that you don't have those uneven performances like in Arkansas or in Auburn, where it was really just hard to move the ball. So it all over the course of the year kind of ended up looking particularly impressive. And yeah, when you take the entire body of work, I mean, Jayden had the second most productive season by a quarterback in LSU history behind Burrow's Heisman campaign. He did as a whole. Crazy
you say that, and then the controversy that looms on Twitter.
Well, because you can also point to the fact that you had those games that were tough. I mean, LSU still won them. On the whole, the ones that we were talking about with Arkansas and Auburn, which I think particularly come to mind. But there were still ways that he had to improve because numbers don't tell you everything. Your eyes also do, and
no doubt.
he had to kind of get through his reads and work on his downfield passing game. So that LSU can continue to make steps as an offense, and that's what he's trying to do, and that's what he hopes can really be the benefit of a full offseason that he didn't have last year. Being able to work on the timing and the chemistry with the receivers. We've seen that be very beneficial for other teams and past LSU teams, and so now LSU is going to try to do it again this time.
I see you got the Final Four cap on as we wrap this up with you. Last night we talked a lot of March, and mine was, I think, UCLA. My Final Four was UCLA, Texas, Bama, Tennessee. Who's your Final Four? Or did your bracket get busted already?
It's not completely busted. It's not in excellent shape either. I had Houston and Alabama in the national championship, with Houston winning it. That looks shaky because of their health.
Oh, okay.
And then Marquette was another one of my Final Four teams. I thought they'd make a run. They obviously did not. And all of a sudden, I'm struggling to forget who my fourth team was. All of a sudden, it's slipping my mind.
Well, Michigan State. That game was in overtime. I forget that side of the bracket, though.
Oh gosh!
I actually had Duke coming out of that side. It was I think who's playing that tonight. I have to go back and look at it.
I've got Gonzaga. I went with the Zags and Drew Timme and all their experience. I don't know if that's one's going to work out for me.
Did Drew Timme first attend Gonzaga in 1981?
It feels that way, but apparently it's only been there like 3 or 4 years.
I know.
I guess because they've been so present in the tournament his entire career that you just continue to see him over and over and over again. And it feels like he's been there forever.
Wilson, what do you make of so when we talk about the new rules in the transfer portal, Matt McMahon, because look, you and I both know this, especially when it's football and guys are hitting the portal. You're always having to talk about how it, things look either when guys leave or guys don't. Should LSU fans be a little alarmed that you got some things going out and not coming in?
You're catching me out of my depth here with men's basketball. It's
okay, all right. Well,
you know what? I feel like I would be giving an uninformed answer. Unfortunately, I don't want to just shut out the question, but I just don't feel like I would be the best source for the men's basketball.
Look, I'm not either. That's why I try to bring people on that can do it for me.
Sorry, our Sheldon Mickles, who covers men's basketball here for the Advocate for us, he'd be your guy. Anybody who wants to know, go read Sheldon's stuff. I'm sure he's been on top of that kind of thing, and Sheldon does a great job for us.
Gonna need to do that.